Now in this film we're going to be showing you how to properly prepare the woodwork in your room ready for painting. This includes your doors, your door frames, your window sills and your skirting boards.
To get a good final result, the woodwork needs some basic preparation. You need to make sure it's free from grease, dust, it's dry, there are no cracks, holes, bubbles or flaky paint.
Now to fill any holes like this or any scratches or cracks in your woodwork, you're going to need a wood filler. You're also going to need a flexible scraper and a stiffer scraper like this for scraping off the excess filler once we've filled our hole. Be really generous with the amount of filler you're going to use, especially in deep holes just like this, and apply like so, making sure we get a nice amount all over our woodwork. Now once we've let this dry for a few moments, we can take our stiffer scraper and scrape off all this excess filler. We don't have to get it really smooth because our sandpaper is going to take it down. It's also a chance as well, especially when we've got deep holes, just to put a little bit more in and make sure we've got a nice smooth finish. Continue around the woodwork, filling in the rest of the holes in exactly the same way. Now we've allowed our filler to dry. We've got three options for sanding. We can use a sanding block like this, which you can buy, or if you haven't got one of those, you can always make your own using an offcut of timber and wrapping the sandpaper around the timber just to give you a firm grip and give you a nice flat surface to sand with. If you haven't got any of those, you can also take sandpaper and fold it into quarters like this. Again, it gives you a nice flat surface to sand with. Now you've got your sanding block, and the easiest way to start is always to work with the grain of the wood. So start sanding with the grain like this, taking your time. And you can always use coarser sandpaper to take the first layer of filler off first, and then use a more finer sandpaper just to finish everything off. We're working with the grain down this side, and again with the grain this way. Make sure to wear a mask when you sand, as dust can be harmful. Using the same technique, sand all the filled holes. Finish off and smooth down the patched areas with a medium grade sandpaper. Now, once we've finished sanding our filler, we're actually going to sand the rest of the woodwork, but we're going to change from using a sanding block and a medium grade sandpaper to using a finer grade sandpaper like this that we can fold into halves or quarters or eighths, and this gives us a little bit more freedom across the rest of the door, getting into all the nooks and crannies. You're not doing this to remove the old paint or expose any bare wood, it's just to give a texture so the paint has a better surface to bind to. This is called creating a key, another thing to help you with that professional finish. But this is also a good time to sand off any peeling paint or any drips of gloss if you have any. Sand all the wooden surfaces you want to paint, like windows and skirting boards.
New wood doesn't need to be washed down, but there is a process to follow before you apply the paint. As with all interior work, when you're going to paint, it's a good idea to ventilate the room that you're going to be working, so make sure that you open a window first. Distinctive knots like this need to be treated with knotting solution. The idea of knotting solution is to stop the resin from the knots bleeding back through and discolouring the paint that you're about to apply to the wood. When the knotting solution has dried, then you can apply a priming coat of paint. This is a 2-in-1 undercoat and primer. It's necessary to prime the wood to allow a good key for the other coats to follow. Once you've allowed the primer to dry for the specified time, you can then use the 2-in-1 undercoat and primer to use as an undercoat.
Now finally, we need to make sure all our woodwork is free from dust or any greasy marks, and we get rid of all the dust just using a dusting brush. Make sure it's nice and clean, and then we're going to need to wash all the woodwork down. Now the best thing to use is some sugar soap. Now sugar soap is not made out of sugar, but it is a slightly acidic cleaner, so wear protective gloves to avoid irritation. Be really generous and coat the whole of the woodwork in the sugar soap, making sure you cover everything as you go along, all over. And then taking a decorator sponge, you actually wash the woodwork down with the sugar soap still on the door. Now this can take quite a while, but it's really important that we make sure we get any greasy marks or any of the last of the dust off of the woodwork. The same process applies for all your woodwork. And then once we're confident it's had a good wash, we're going to take an ordinary cloth and put it into some warm water. And just make sure we get the last of this sugar soap off the door. Rinse any of the excess sugar soap off with the rag. Once we get down to the bottom of the door, it should already start to be drying up here, but it's best just to give it 15 or 20 minutes to make sure it really is dry before we get any paint out. There. Now we've filled all the holes and cracks in our woodwork. We've also keyed our woodwork, washed it down and allowed it to dry, and we're now ready to move on to the next stage, which is the painting.
So for more ideas and know-how, check out more of our films, or go to DIY.com or pop into your local store.